That's the sound of a big deal. At Wayfair, that sound happens a lot. Dream sofa for half the price? Big deal. New dining table you've been eyeing for months? Big deal. Finally picking up those last few pieces and finishing that bedroom? Now that's a really big deal. Whatever your home needs, Wayfair has the selection, the savings, and over millions of 5-star reviews to back it up. Shop wayfair.com today before someone else snags your big deal.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Welcome to Lifestyle Solopreneur, the community for entrepreneurs who put lifestyle first. Join your host Flavia Barris as she interviews successful lifestyle solopreneurs and shares ideas to help you find the perfect balance between lifestyle, business, and self. Flavia is an attorney, marketing expert, and founder of several online academies. She's been featured in major media including BBC World News, The Wall Street Journal, The New York Post, ESPN Television, and more. Join us for this episode of Lifestyle Solopreneur.
Hey, Lifestyle Solopreneurs. Today we get to meet with Mark Hansen. He is the founder of Second Comma, a financial planning firm that takes overwhelmed business owners through his Clarity financial planning process to create structure, sequence, and stability, all while taking his kids to school, never missing a family dinner, and fitting in the spontaneous 1 p.m. fishing trip on a Wednesday. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's really good to be here.
It's great to have you here. And, I love talking finances. I think it's a topic that we all need to spend some time thinking through, being strategic about. It's something we don't really learn in school. They don't teach it in middle school, high school. I mean, you can get all the way through college and never really think about financial planning or what that means and what that aspect of adulting really needs to look like. So I'm glad you're here. I think this is great information to sort of broadcast to the world. But how did you end up in the field of finance? What was your journey that sparked that desire for you to help other people plan their financial strategy?
When I look back, it all makes sense. In the moment when I was walking through it and going from job to job to job, I didn't really understand what was happening. But in hindsight, I can look back and I can see the path of how all these things connect. So I came out of school, graduated from college, and I had a degree in what's called industrial distribution, which is basically everything from what are you going to make? How are you going to make it? How are you going to price it? How are you going to sell it? Really the nuts and bolts, the ins and outs of what is a business. And then I stepped out of college and I went into sales. And I immediately got exposure to seeing people's personal financial situations. And I realized I did not have a heart to complete the transaction if I didn't think it was in the best interest of the person on the other side of the table. And I found that to be very interesting because in a commission-based world, I was now in conflict with how I was earning my money and the transactions required to do that. So that was something that just kind of stuck in my mind. I left there and I went to work for a small startup. It was a 3-person wine company. And I remember doing some analysis for them. I was the make it happen guy, right? One of the owners had all the funding. One of the owners cast the vision. And my job was to tie those two things together. And as I was doing that, I got really good at kind of business theoretical analysis, if that makes sense. As in, if we do X, it will produce Y, which will cost Z. Can we afford it? Are the good consequences of these decisions, are they actually good things, right? And so as we're working through there, I started to really hone this skill, and I got to where I was forecasting that the company was going to go bankrupt because of the decisions that we were making. And I started cautioning the owners, and they didn't listen to what I said. And so one day my phone rings and they say, "Mark, we're out of money. The company's going to shut down and we have to let you go." And that also was very interesting to me, where I had presented a very logical argument, but people could override the logical argument because they wanted the emotional appeal. And that I saw the similarities between that and my first job, where people were overriding the logical decision of not doing this transaction because they wanted the emotional appeal of getting the thing that they wanted. And so now I'm kind of stacking these things together. And I'll fast forward a little bit through the rest of my career, because from there, I took that honed skill of theoretical financial analysis for businesses, and I moved through the consumer packaged good industry, and I landed at eventually a hotel renovation company, where I was then running the budgeting department for hotel renovations. And so it was a budget anywhere from, call it $500,000 up to $70 million. And my team was in charge of doing these things. And I started to see it was the exact same thing where there were these logical, well laid out, well thought out decisions, and people were overriding them for these emotional desires that they had. And I thought this is very, very interesting, being in so many different careers and so many different realms of work and seeing the same overlap. And so then something came up with my career where my boss essentially said, do you want this career or are you going to choose your family? Because what was on the table was a promotion, a lot of hoopla in the corporate world, right? And it was dangling in front of me, but it was at the same time that my wife and I were trying to start a family. And it was, well, here's a well thought out, kind of a logical thing. Mark, do you want this? And all of a sudden I'm on the other side of that, making what feels like an emotional decision that doesn't line up with the logic, but it is actually what I wanted in the future. And so that was the start of me exiting the corporate world, which meant I had to do something different. And along that timeline, I had been introduced to somebody who was in the financial planning industry. And he really talked about how it was kind of a ministry effort with people's hearts to say, what do you want? And are you doing things that help you align with that? Are the actions you're taking actually getting you the outcomes that you want? And I found that to be a very interesting way to think about money and to talk about money, and getting away from hotels and getting back into one-on-one or one-to-two or one-to-a-few relationships with people. That sounded very interesting to me. And so that became the launch point of Second Comma, where now I get to sit with business owners and I help them get clarity, which is why my financial planning process is called Clarity. We're trying to work through all the different areas of personal finance and business strategy, and we're trying to tie it all together in a way that makes sense to the extent that the business owner benefits from the meetings, benefits from the strategies, and can actually, do things that yield the results that they want.
So where is it that people sort of mess up financial planning, especially entrepreneurs? Because that's like its own category of person, right? An entrepreneur is a business owner, not just getting income as a salary, but usually it's some kind of a profit or attempted profit at a business. And so what do you see as that biggest mistake that's out there, especially in the world of entrepreneurship?
I think there's a couple things that really trip up entrepreneurs. One is what technically is called the cash conversion cycle. But what we're talking about is, okay, I find a client and they agree to the fee. Pretend like the fee is $10,000. Well, there's a very big difference between when the client agrees to the $10,000 fee and when the client pays the $10,000 fee and when the dollars actually hit your account and when the services are provided. And there is a sequence of events that takes place right there. And sometimes entrepreneurs don't have the right systems or don't have the right people supporting them or lose sight of where is the cash and when is it in the correct spot to start doing something with it. As an example, just because a client commits to a $10,000 fee and signs paperwork that they will eventually pay a $10,000 fee doesn't mean that I can turn around and in the next breath spend those $10,000. And so that the consequences inside of there, we're talking about the cash conversion cycle. And that's one thing. The other piece that I see that trips people up is, well, I have this business is going good. If I had this new software, this new thing, this new hire, then the business could do even more. And what happens is entrepreneurs become very centric or endemic with their business, as in they don't let the money move out of the business. And for a period of time, that can be really healthy. That can help a young or an unstable company become stable and continue to exist, which is continuing to produce the revenue, which can turn into profit, which benefits the entrepreneur. That all sounds really good. But eventually, sometimes people forget to start diverting those business assets to the personal side of the balance sheet, which means we're forgetting to prepare for retirement, which means time is passing, time continues to march on, and we are accidentally squandering our best chances to start preparing for retirement, where we have the longest runway before we step into retirement.
For me, I think it really is different in different eras of your life too. I mean, I really do see, even in just as I go through decades, and first you're in your 20s, then your 30s, and then people have kids. And so life sort of changes. And do you have a sort of segment of the population, maybe age-wise, that you really feel like this is the population I want to work with? Here's where I can make the biggest impact. Or is it really just kind of all over the board for you?
I do specifically enjoy, I have a young family and I love working with people that have young families when you can talk about your kids and you share a story with me about anything from first steps to the first fish to the first car, anything along those lines. It is really fun to talk to people about their kids and their business. So if I can put together a larger timeline, how did I arrive there? Why do I enjoy those people? When you're in your 20s and you're a business owner, sometimes retirement feels so far away that it's not something you can really conceptualize. And since you can't conceptualize it and it doesn't feel solid enough and that it's not maybe close enough on the horizon, it's really hard to take it seriously sometimes. And so those business owners, there are people in their 20s that are successful business owners that are trying to figure out, how do I start setting money aside for retirement? But I find that the percentage of people in that era are lower than, say, we get into the 30s where people are having families. Life becomes vastly more real when there's another generation that is completely dependent on you. And I see that people start taking their finances very seriously. If we move on from there, right, kids grow up, eventually they fly the coop, eventually they leave. And what I see on the backside of this is, okay, now all the kids are gone, all the kids are independent. Now life feels calm enough that I can start to put something else on my plate. And that's when people often put back onto their plate planning for retirement. And then they realize, oh, that's what that thing is on the horizon. It's so close. I want to be out of here in 8 years or 5 years or 10 years or whatever number it is that they pick. And they realize, oh, wow, this is really hard. This is a heavy lift. There's a lot of saving I need to do because I didn't prioritize it earlier. And so on one side of the spectrum, people are almost so far away from retirement that it's hard for them to conceptualize. On the other side of the spectrum, it's almost hard for them to understand that a plan can still be made and the impending timing of retirement feels scary. And so I like to catch people right in the middle, people who are far enough into life that life feels very real, but far enough away from retirement that retirement isn't this big scary monster that we have to solve in the next 6 months or something like that. And that's coincidentally, when people have young families, that's also what I like to talk about. So that's where I find myself having the vast majority of my clients.
And you said it's kind of difficult for people, and I agree with this, to visualize and conceptualize, what would financial planning look like? What would the journey be? But I think it's also hard for people to conceptualize what that first step might look like. It might be a little mysterious, like, where do I start? Or even, if I meet with a financial planner, what would that meeting look like? Like, what would we talk about? What would we do? So what is kind of that early stage financial plan process? How does that look for somebody? Let's say someone was meeting with you for the very first time and they wanted to move forward. What would happen at that initial meeting?
The very first thing that I think is important with anybody is you get a map, because the map is what you can reference. And now I don't mean a literal map. I mean, what we need to do when I start working with a client, I need to get all the information out of their mind and onto something that I can reference. And ideally, it's on something physical where I can write it down, put some boxes over here, color code it, and start to say, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Client, when I say X, I'm talking about this. I'm talking about this blue box right here. And then we can have a real conversation about the blue box. What's not helpful and what I find confusing when other advisors don't take a similar strategy is, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Client, can you just articulate to me everything that's in your mind? And then I'm going to try to organize it in my mind. And then we're going to have what is almost two false conversations back and forth where I can't see your map and you can't see my map. And we're going to probably, unfortunately, spend a lot of our time arguing about the nuances versus my process. I want you to tell me everything you can because I want to write it down and make sure I'm understanding you, because I don't want to waste anybody's time accidentally talking about something I think they said simply because I misunderstood what they were trying to tell me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. It really does. And I mean, you've even offered to provide listeners with this asset map, as a gift, just to use the asset map to, I love how when you described it, you said it's like a financial x-ray, but without the awkward like hospital gown. I thought that was really funny because it's a financial x-ray. Like show me what your financial picture looks like. And for a lot of people, until you put it down on paper, they may not even really think about their own net worth or how much they have in assets and where it might be and kind of distributed in different places. I know, people who have a very like heavy leaning into one asset class. And what that means is, let's say somebody invests very heavily in the stock market, but not really so much in real estate or other things. And then others may have really all of their assets in the home they live in, and they haven't invested in retirement accounts or stocks or mutual funds or, all the different ways that you can invest and you can hold assets. I know there's people that are like, I just put everything down on crypto and that's fine. That's what they did, but maybe they didn't get any advice on how to be a little more diversified. So what are your own sort of feelings on diversification? And is there a set formula for everybody, or does it kind of vary based on different factors?
When I think about this, if we go back to the previous idea of getting the map, from the map, once Mr. and Mrs. Client articulate to me what is true about their financial world, then I can start to articulate to them what I think are the positives and the negatives about their financial situation. And what I'm doing is I'm holding it up against that framing, the Clarity financial planning framework that I talked about earlier. Clarity is an acronym, and it's an acronym because I believe covering cash flow, legacy, asset protection, retirement, investing, tax planning, and your mindset are all things that need to be done in reference to the map that we just made. Cash flow is what drives the entire thing. We need to utilize the cash flow. We're hoping for retirement, but that's, call it 10 to 40 years down the road. And so that's a long journey. What do we need to do along that long journey? Well, we need to have probably some asset protection, maybe some term life insurance or something like that. And then if we're working on a young family, well, if you successfully achieve, obtaining, call it $4 million of term life insurance, making up a number, you can't hand that to a 5 and an 8-year-old. You need to do it through an estate planning thing, which would be called a revocable living trust in some scenarios when that makes sense. And so you see how these pieces start to all tie together. Now, does that mean everybody needs the same amount of term life insurance? Absolutely not. And that's why during the financial planning process, I'm extracting information. And that's why it's very important to understand, Mr. and Mrs. Client, is this what you're telling me? Is this true? This is what I heard, but is this what you meant to say? And again, we're always referencing the map so that I can point to this blue box, that red box, this green box down here that says you both own it. We point to that on the map. I make sure it's all clear. And I'm deriving all of my math based on these things that we've already agreed between the 3 of us or the 2 of us or the 5 of us. These are the truths. And so then we're planning in reference to that. Does everybody need the same amount of term life insurance? No. Conceptually, we're saying if you cannot self-insure, we need to have some insurance. And so you can think of kind of a slow fade from an original amount of coverage down to a theoretical zero. The theoretical zero means I'm just going to self-insure. I don't need to have any additional insurance. Does everybody need to save the same amount for retirement? No, it really depends on when do you want to retire? How long do we have? What kind of investment portfolio are you willing to commit to, which will help drive the theoretical return that we could get on those invested dollars? And well, how much money do you want to spend in retirement? Because if you want to retire on $50,000, I think it's easy to understand that that's a very different number that you need as a total portfolio than if you're trying to spend $200,000 a year. Does that make sense when I kind of explain it that way?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. It really does. And so let's shift a little bit. But before we shift topics, I do want to ask you, how do people obtain a copy of this map? The free asset map. I think it's great. We're actually going to post it. We have a vault. We call it our podcast guest gift vault, and people can access it at podcastguestgift.com, podcastguestgift.com. So that's where there will be a link to this, as well as links to all of the other great, gifts and things that people have offered when they're guests on the show. But if someone wants to go direct to obtain that map or to contact your firm or to learn more about you, where would they go?
So if you want to start super conservative, very, very casual, you could just go and Google assetmap.com. You look at asset-map, and you'll see the software. Now, it's geared for financial advisors. So when you come across the website, it's going to talk to financial advisors. It's not for you as the consumer. And so but that's the most casual way to get into it. If you want to learn more about me and how I use Asset Map, that's going to be at my website, which is second-comma.com. On there, you can learn about what I do, who I do it for, why I do it that way. And on the website, you can get to a link up at the top of the menu where you can start your own asset map. But if you're this far into the podcast and you're thinking, I don't need to know anything else, what he's talking about is exactly what I need, then all you have to do is send the word asset, so ASSET, all caps, send that to me at 972-521-6857, and I will send you back the link that you need, and you can immediately get started. When you get started, you could be less than 10 minutes away from having your own asset map that I am, again, more than happy to give to you, my gift to your audience.
That's amazing. And I always like asking people this. How do you stay sane? Because again, being in the world of entrepreneurship and, being in a high demand career, like being a financial planner, people call you all the time. People need you all the time. There's emergencies, especially I'm sure at the end of year, right? It's the end of the year. People are like, oh no, I need to really think about things before the tax year closes. And so you're getting all these phone calls and texts and emails during the holidays. So how do you stay sane and balanced and where you feel like a whole person and not like someone whose entire life is just work, work, work at the keyboard?
I appreciate you being so honest about that. That's wonderful verbiage for it. Honestly, those are not things that I would want for myself or for other business owners. And so I built my firm to give a different and what I would say is a better experience to people. So when somebody comes into my universe, when my ecosystem of Second Comma, I provide as much structure as possible. And while that's beneficial to me, because then I get to execute the structure, it's also beneficial to the client. We're working with somebody's entire life savings, and there's a way to honor that by giving somebody a system and a process. And so when you work with me, we're not going to wait until December 20th to try to figure out how much needs to go into your investment account because it's the end of the year. And if you don't do it by the 31st, you're going to lose your opportunity. We're not waiting until December 20th. We're actively scheduling a meeting. I have a meeting with all of my clients in October, and that is our end of year wrap up meeting where we're saying what has happened so far in the year and what do we forecast is going to happen in the last quarter of the year. And with those things and with me working with the CPA and the attorney, and I try to be friends with as many of my clients, other professionals as possible. I want us working in harmony because then we can put together a plan that says, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Client, by the end of the year, these are the deadlines that we have. And we want to do actions A, B, and C. Does that sound good to you? That sounds great. If we do these things, it will yield these results. You'll have these new balances in these accounts and we'll satisfy these requirements. Does that sound good? That does sound good. Let's do those things. And so then now we're talking about the end of the year. On the other side of the calendar, we have another meeting at the beginning of the year. I'm in the middle of this process right now, actually, where we have our spring planning meetings. And we always do it before tax deadline. And so we're planning twice a year very intentionally. If there's an emergency, people have my number. All of my clients know how to get a hold of me for sure. But I'm also doing some education on top of these two meetings every year. I'm doing some education in the middle to help people understand what is an emergency and what is not an emergency. When you don't know confidently what an emergency is, I think about when we started having children, your first child, every cough, you're thinking, oh my gosh, this is not good. And you start freaking out. And then as at least for us, as we started to interact with the pediatrician, we started to learn what the pediatrician already knew. Babies do lots of stuff. It's all weird and new to us because we were new parents. It's not weird or new to the pediatrician because he had experience and expertise. Flip that around. Now I am the person who has the experience and the expertise, and I'm working with these business owners, and maybe they get a letter in the mail that feels kind of scary. And so they call me and they say, Mark, is this an emergency? And I say, no, that's just a piece of paper. I want you to hold on to it. And I want you to bring it to our October meeting, or I want you to scan it and put it into your digital vault, and I'll bring it to the October meeting. And over the course of time, people start to learn, oh, there's a cadence. There's an intentionality. We're going to talk about this in October. We're going to talk about this in the spring. And then people start to learn my framework and my cadence of meeting and planning and doing that on an ongoing basis. And that is what helps people feel confident to maybe not call everything an emergency.
I think it's great. You are the cure for procrastination, and that is something everyone can use. So, Mark, it's been so great speaking to you, learning about Second Comma, your firm, and just learning, more about how you do your work and how you help people. And thank you so much for everything that you do in the world for your clients and others, and also for putting it out there on this podcast today to a new audience for you. I think it is just wonderful to have you share such useful information that is so beneficial.
I appreciate it. I've enjoyed being here, and thank you for asking such great questions.
Thanks so much, and hope to speak to you soon. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, and if you leave a review on iTunes, I promise I will read every single review. If you know someone who makes a full-time living from part-time work, and maybe this is you, please visit lifestylesolopreneur.com to nominate a guest or to nominate yourself. Because remember this, money doesn't buy happiness. But money in the hands of a happy person, there is no greater tool.
Today's episode was brought to you by the Get Shift Done program. It's a lifestyle-changing online class to help you define your business and lifestyle ambitions, and to set goals in a way you've never experienced before. This class will 10x your daily productivity with methods that will blow your mind. And if you use a coupon code podcast, the class tuition is 99% off. Visit GetShiftDone.com to enroll today.